Many Americans dream about leaving the States to find a better life, whether it's to stretch their dollar, experience a new culture, or to escape the daily grind for a more rewarding pace of life. And in many places, housing, food, and healthcare can cost a fraction of what you'd pay back home. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Adjusting to a new way of life, dealing with red tape, and tackling language barriers can be tough. And while many areas are safe, crime can be a concern in some spots. Even so, for a lot of people, the vibrant cultures, warm communities, and more affordable lifestyle make it all worth it. So whether you're thinking about leaving the U.S. or just curious about where most Americans have relocated, here are the top 10 countries that U.S. citizens choose for a fresh start. First on the list at number 10 is the United Kingdom. When it comes to Americans packing up and moving abroad, it's not hard to see why the UK lands on the list. On the one hand, there's a comforting familiarity thanks to the shared language. But on the other, living across the pond comes with its own unique mix of benefits and hurdles. Let's start with what makes the UK so attractive. London is a prime spot for many Americans. It's a cultural hub filled with centuries of history, a buzzing art scene, and cultural events that range from iconic West End theater shows to vibrant music festivals. If you're into getting around easily, public transportation is a huge win here. Major cities, especially London, make it pretty simple to go car-free, with reliable trains, buses, and subways. Even trips beyond the city to places like Edinburgh or the beautiful Cotswold countryside are doable without a car. Another thing that gets a lot of praise is the healthcare system, known as the National Health Service, or NHS. Healthcare is either free or comes at a low cost when you need it, which is a big contrast to how things work in the US, where insurance costs can be sky high. Sure, you might have to wait a bit longer for non-urgent treatments, but having healthcare that's so accessible brings a lot of peace of mind. In terms of the cost of living, the UK is around 5 to 15% lower than the US. Renting a one-bedroom apartment in a city center in the UK on average is around 20 to 40% cheaper than in big US cities. The average monthly salary in the UK, however, is about 68% of what you might earn in the US. As for other living expenses, things like groceries and transportation can vary, but are generally competitive with US prices. It all comes down to adjusting your budget and expectations. On the plus side, work-life balance often improves for those who make the move. UK jobs typically come with at least 28 days of paid leave, and there's less pressure to work endless overtime. Also, for most, moving to the UK is about more than just money. Concerns over political tensions, gun violence, and healthcare costs in the U.S. can push people towards the UK's steadier, although not perfect, political landscape. It may not be without its issues, but it often feels less intense compared to what many Americans are used to. Cultural differences can also take some getting used to. Brits are known for being a bit more reserved, leaning on politeness and a dry, often sarcastic sense of humor. Then there's a pub culture and that ever-present British wit, which can either make you feel right at home or take a bit to warm up to. For Americans looking for a blend of adventure, cultural richness, and some level of stability, the UK remains a strong contender. Just know that balancing pros like accessible healthcare and historical charm against challenges like high living costs and a reserved social vibe will make all the difference in making the move work. The top 3 cities that Americans move to in the UK are London, Edinburgh, and Manchester. Coming in at number 9 is France. France is a place where world-class culture meets everyday charm, with everything from exquisite cuisine to jaw-dropping art and architecture. If you've got a family, the education system here is highly regarded, and the economy's pretty strong, offering jobs across sectors like tech, finance, and the arts. However, unlike the UK, language can be a major issue here. Outside of major cities, you'll find English isn't widely spoken, and there are other challenges like dealing with French bureaucracy or figuring out cultural norms. But most find that these hurdles are worth it for the rich experiences and personal growth. Also, life in France isn't just about work, it's about living well. People here know how to strike a balance, putting a strong emphasis on leisure and savoring the good stuff. The focus on enjoying life often leads to a longer life expectancy and a high sense of well-being. The cost of living in the US is about 8.6% higher than in France, and including rent, it's about 28.8% higher. On the flip side, salaries in France tend to be lower. But with the overall lower cost of living, it often evens out. One of France's best features is its healthcare. It's mostly public and much more affordable than the US. And with their 35-hour work week and generous vacation time, life in France can be more relaxed and perfect for enjoying all that great food and leisure time. Getting around is also convenient. Public transportation is great and cheaper than in many U.S. cities, making it easy to explore both urban areas and the stunning countryside. But if you're thinking of owning a car, be prepared for higher fuel costs. Adjusting to life in France has its ups and downs. Learning the culture and language takes time, but the overall quality of life makes it worthwhile for those that choose to make the move. U.S. citizens moving to France often choose specific cities that offer a blend of lifestyle, culture, and community support. The top 3 are Lyon, Nice, and Toulouse. At the number 8 spot is New Zealand. The first thing that hits you when you step into New Zealand is the sheer beauty of the place. It's like a postcard everywhere you turn, from the dynamic Southern Alps to the calm, inviting beaches of the Bay of Plenty. Life here moves at a relaxed pace, with a strong community feel and a deep love for the great outdoors. Kiwis, as New Zealanders are affectionately called, are some of the friendliest people around, and the work-life balance is incredible. People really value their downtime and make good use of it, with hiking, sailing, and other outdoor adventures. The culture here is laid back, with far less focus on material stuff compared to what you might see in the US. And not to mention that it's constantly ranked as one of the safest countries in the world and has a publicly funded healthcare system, which means residents can get essential medical services for little to no cost. But of course, nowhere is perfect. The cost of living in New Zealand can be high, especially for imported goods, due to hefty import taxes. Housing costs, particularly in cities like Auckland and Wellington, aren't cheap either. And living expenses have been increasing, including rises in rent and fuel prices, and not to mention that salaries in New Zealand are around 15% lower than in the US. With all that being said, the cost of living here is still about 21% lower than in the US, with rent being about 37% lower on average. This helps to offset the lower pay. And when it comes to getting around, transportation can be a bit tricky. Since the country's geography means a lot of folks rely on cars, gas prices are higher than in the US. Public transportation is available, but it can be on the pricey side too. But despite these challenges, New Zealand offers an inevitable quality of life thanks to a stunning natural beauty, welcoming communities, and accessible healthcare. Sure, some costs can be high, but for many, the perks more than make up for it. The most popular cities for American transports are Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. At number 7 is Australia. Many Americans wanting a change that still feels somewhat familiar have found it in the land down under, where the overall cost of living is pretty similar to that in the US. Food and housing costs tend to be about 11 and 10% more expensive in the US than in Australia. But on the flip side, transportation is a lot cheaper in the US, coming in at about 23% less expensive than in Australia. One big advantage of living in Australia, as has been the common theme with all the previous entries, is the healthcare system. Australia's public system, Medicare, provides straightforward and affordable prices. It covers many medical needs like hospital visits and doctor's appointments, often at little or no cost to residents. And though many Americans that have moved to Australia mention how much they appreciate the work life there, some statistics show that Australians actually work longer hours compared to other Western countries, which can lead to feelings of burnout. But on the positive side, Australians typically enjoy more vacation time, averaging about 20 days of paid leave each year. When it comes to job security, Australia shines in sectors like healthcare, mining, and education, providing solid job opportunities. The higher minimum wage in Australia also contributes to greater financial freedom for workers compared to the US. And while the climate varies by region, there are plenty of chances to enjoy year-round outdoor fun. Overall, moving to Australia allows for a slower-paced lifestyle, strong community ties, and access to excellent public services. Some costs may be similar or even higher than the US, but the overall quality of life often makes up for it. The most popular cities for Americans moving to Australia are Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Coming in at number 6 is Thailand. Moving to Thailand can really shake things up for those wanting a unique and affordable lifestyle. Not to mention that living here is a lot cheaper than the US. For a single person, Thailand is about 64% less expensive than the US. And if you have a family, the monthly expenses in Thailand are about 55% cheaper overall. When it comes to rent, the difference is pretty striking. The average one-bedroom apartment in Thailand is roughly 316% cheaper than in America. And for families, rent in Thailand will cost you about 198% less than in the US. Food costs are also lower. You can expect to spend about 118% less a month on groceries and dining than you would stateside. Now let's talk about salaries. The average monthly take-home pay in Thailand is about $696, while in the US, it's around $4,635, meaning Americans earn about 566% more on average. As far as the healthcare system in Thailand, most Americans living there have a positive view of it. One big plus is that Thailand has universal health coverage, with about 99.5% of the population insured, making it easy for people to access care. The cost of healthcare is another major advantage. In Thailand, medical services are much cheaper than in the US, and private hospitals offer high-quality care at a fraction of the price you'd pay back home. Life in Thailand is about slowing down, connecting with the community, and soaking up everything it has to offer. The culture is rich, the food is amazing, and the landscapes, ranging from beaches to mountains, are just stunning. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that language can be a challenge. English is common in touristy spots, but it's less so once you head off the beaten path. But Thailand's mix of affordability, rich culture, and gorgeous scenery is hard to beat. And it is what attracts plenty of Americans looking for a fresh adventure. The 3 most popular cities for Americans making the move are Chiang Mai, Hua Hin, and Bangkok. At the number 5 spot is Costa Rica. This Central American paradise is famous for its breathtaking beaches, lush rainforests, and incredible biodiversity. But beyond its scenery, what makes Costa Rica such a magnet for U.S. citizens is its welcoming communities and, of course, the opportunity to stretch their dollar further. The cost of living here is significantly lower than in the U.S. Overall, rent prices in Costa Rica are about 56% lower, making it much more feasible for retirees, remote workers, and families looking for a new start. And depending on their lifestyle, many find their overall monthly expenses reduced by nearly half compared to life in the U.S. Healthcare is another key factor for drawing Americans. Costa Rica's universal healthcare system, known as the CCSS or CAHA, provides solid medical coverage for substantially less cost. And for those who prefer faster service, private, high-quality healthcare options are also available without the hefty price tag. Food expenses are another area where savings add up quickly. Local produce markets offer fresh fruits, vegetables, and other staples, also at a fraction of U.S. grocery store prices. Public transportation is also affordable and dependable, making it easy to get around without the high costs associated with owning a car back in the States. And while average salaries in Costa Rica are lower, roughly 80% less than typical U.S. wages, the reduced cost of living allows many Americans to maintain a comfortable lifestyle. Another great benefit is Costa Rica's proximity to the United States. Flights to major U.S. cities like Miami and Houston are relatively short, making it easy to visit friends and family or manage business back home. Many locals speak English, which can ease the transition, and there's a supportive community of fellow U.S. transplants willing to help newcomers adjust. Now let's talk about issues. First, while the cost of living is generally lower, prices in popular destinations can be surprisingly high, particularly for imported goods and certain services. And to legally work in Costa Rica, you'll need a work permit or permanent residency, leading many to rely on income from pensions or businesses based elsewhere. Driving in Costa Rica can also be an adventure, with potholes and limited road signs being common. To add to that, tropical climate brings heavy rainfall and high humidity, along with occasional earthquakes and flooding. Also, while English is widely spoken in some areas, Spanish is the official language, and not knowing it can sometimes be a barrier. And lastly, petty crime in certain areas means being vigilant and possibly investing in added security. All in all, Costa Rica offers a lifestyle that's hard to match, blending natural beauty, vibrant culture, and a laid-back pace with affordability. But by making smart choices, such as avoiding expensive tourist areas, shopping locally, and using public transportation, you can thrive without overextending your budget. The most popular cities in Costa Rica for American transplants are San Jose, Tamarindo, and Quepos Manuel Antonio. Dropping in at number 4 is Spain. Spain blends rich culture, gorgeous scenery, and a laid-back lifestyle that's hard to resist. And once again, one of the biggest benefits of moving to Spain is its offering of high-quality healthcare at a much lower cost than the States. Food is another plus. Groceries in Spain are about 32% cheaper, and dining out costs roughly 45% less. And while salaries in Spain are lower, about 60% less than in the US, the cost of living here is also far more affordable. Housing alone is roughly 63% cheaper. The Mediterranean climate is another big draw, with warm weather and sunny skies almost all year. Spain's vibrant culture makes it even more appealing. From lively cities and historic architecture to festivals and traditions, there's always something to keep life exciting. It's also a relatively safe country with low crime rates. And travel within Europe is easy thanks to Spain's location and access to the Schengen area, making weekend getaways to nearby countries possible. Also, moving there is relatively straightforward thanks to visa options like the non-lucrative visa, which is perfect for retirees and remote workers. Of course, living in Spain does come with some downsides. The language barrier can be tricky for those who aren't fluent in Spanish, even though many locals speak English. And while the overall cost of living is lower, popular areas and big cities can still be pricey, particularly for housing and some services. However, housing is more affordable outside of the busiest cities, public transportation is cheap and reliable, and personal and utility expenses also tend to be more manageable than in the US. The top 3 cities for US expats are Barcelona, Madrid, and Malaga. Coming in at number 3 is Portugal. Portugal is a country that really has it all. Rugged mountains up north and warm beaches with stunning cliffs in the southern Algarve. Its capital, Lisbon, is known for its mix of historic charm, lively neighborhoods, and vibrant atmosphere. And compared to the US, things here are about 39% cheaper overall. Rent, in particular, is a major draw. On average, it's about 54% less than in the US. To put that into perspective, a one-bedroom apartment in Lisbon might cost you around $1,000 a month, which is a steal compared to places like New York or San Francisco. Another huge perk is its excellent and much cheaper public healthcare system. Food and dining out are also easy on the wallet. Groceries are roughly 42% cheaper, and eating out is about 44% less expensive than back in the US. And while salaries in Portugal tend to be about 59% lower than what you'd earn in the US, the lower cost of living definitely helps to balance things out. Also, the country's low crime rates, rich history, and vibrant transplant communities in Lisbon, Porto, and Algarve add to its appeal, making it both safe and culturally enriching. That said, there are a few bumps in the road. In popular areas, finding affordable housing can be tricky with high demand. Getting through the visa and residency process can be slow and frustrating. And while plenty of locals speak English, not knowing Portuguese can sometimes make day-to-day life a bit challenging. Also, though the weather is mostly great, some regions might surprise you with unexpected cold or rain. And adjusting to things like late dinners and midday breaks may take some getting used to, but many find it's all part of the charm. Americans moving to Portugal choose cities that offer a good mix of culture, affordability, and community support. The top 3 are Lisbon, Porto, and Braga. At number 2 is our northern neighbor, Canada. The cost of living in Canada is about 15% lower than in the US, but it really depends on where you settle. Big cities like Toronto and Vancouver can be pricey. For instance, renting a one-bedroom apartment in Toronto runs about $1,700 in US dollars. Cheaper than New York, sure, but definitely not cheap. One huge perk of living in Canada is healthcare. Thanks to the universal system, you don't have to worry about massive medical bills. It's all covered, but groceries can be a bit pricier than what you're used to in the States, partly because of weather and labor issues driving up costs. Getting around can be more expensive too, with gas prices usually 20 to 25% higher than in the US. Also, salaries in Canada are generally lower, with the average monthly take-home pay sitting around 57% less than in the US. Taxes are higher too, but they go towards healthcare and education, so many feel it's worth it. Overall, there's a mix of things to love and a few issues to deal with for people that cross the border. The good stuff? Affordable healthcare, a more chill political vibe, tons of cultural diversity, and jaw-dropping natural beauty. On the flip side, housing can be expensive in some places, winters are cold, like really cold. Non-urgent healthcare wait can sometimes drag, and finding a great job can be tricky. At the end of the day, there's a lot to like, but it helps to know what you're looking for. The most popular cities for Americans crossing over are Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. And coming in at number 1 is our southern neighbor, Mexico. From lively cities and stunning beaches to charming small towns, it offers a mix of history, natural beauty, affordability, and great proximity to the US. And it's because of those variables that Mexico lands at the top of this list. However, there are real pros and cons to consider. First, the cost of living in Mexico is about 64% less expensive than in the US. Housing costs are also much lower, with rent prices for a one-bedroom apartment in Mexico City averaging around $563 compared to $1,635 in some major U.S. cities. Groceries are 43 to 50% cheaper, and healthcare costs are about 50% lower than in the U.S. On the other hand, safety is a mixed bag here. There's no denying that organized crime and cartel violence exist, but they're typically targeted and don't usually involve everyday people or tourists. Plenty of Americans say they feel safer here than in some U.S. cities, but it really depends on where you live. Also, sorting out residency permits and other paperwork is slow and complicated. You might run into issues with utilities and internet reliability too, which can be frustrating when you're used to everything running smoothly. When it comes to finding a place to live, there are plenty of options. Online platforms, word of mouth, and even walking through neighborhoods can help you snag a good rental. Just be prepared to deal with differences from the U.S. market, like negotiating directly with landlords. Culturally, Mexico has a lot to offer, from lively festivals and delicious food to friendly locals and a sense of community that can make it feel like home. But adjusting does take effort. Learning Spanish helps a lot, not just for practicality, but for showing respect to locals. And depending on where you settle, you might have to adapt to a different climate and lifestyle. Mexico offers a lot, a lower cost of living, vibrant culture, and warm people, but it's not perfect. But if you're flexible and open to adapting, it can be a great place to live. Just go in with your eyes wide open. The 3 most popular cities for Americans that have made the move are Mexico City, Mérida, and San Miguel de Allende. Well, folks, that's all of it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And as always, thanks for watching and safe travels.